Morning, everyone. This is the May 21st, 2024 meeting of the Special Joint City Council and Redevelopment Agency budget, and it is now called to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and posted in compliance with the open meeting law. These proceedings are being video recorded as well as presented live on KCLV Cable Channel 2. You may also watch the meeting live on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, on the Go Vegas app. The City Council meeting, as well as all other KCLV programming, may be viewed on the internet at www.kclv.tv/live. The proceedings will be rebroadcast on KCLV Channel 2 and the web on the Wednesday, May 22nd at 4 p.m., also on Thursday at 10 a.m., Friday at 4 p.m. For public comment related to items on the agenda, citizen participation and public hearing items, we have available a speaker card, which you may complete and submit to our city clerk up front. Cards are available in the clerk's office or at the rear of these chambers. If you do not submit a card, however, it does not prevent you from speaking under public comment, citizen participation, or specified public hearing items. If anyone's present today who has need for hearing impaired equipment, please see our city clerk up front. And if you parked in the parking garage across the street, a self-validation machine is located in the foyer between council chambers and the security desk. You walk through to enter our chambers. You must have your ticket to use the machine. However, if you do not, please see security personnel when exiting for a validation coupon. And here we go. This is agenda item 3. Public comment for this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. The amount of time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. All comments made will be cross-referenced to those specific items. If anyone submitted a speaker card who wishes to speak under this portion of the agenda, please come to the podium, state your name for the record. It's your opportunity to address council and redevelopment agency, but the council and redevelopment agency is they are not able to respond or engage in dialogue. We'll set the time at 1 minute. Madam Clerk, please. And anyone wishing to make any comment. And good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mayor Goodman and distinguished Redevelopment Agency and Joint City Council. I'm Catherine Duncan. And I'm pleased to attend this special meeting of the Joint RDA and Las Vegas City Council. I have 2 concerns. I believe this redevelopment agency was established back in 1986. And when it was originally established, it had the historic West Side in mind. Now, since that time, the RDA has been expanded and expanded and expanded, and yet the historic West Side has gotten probably the smallest percentage of any dollar from the RDA. And I'd like to know how we're going to address getting funding into the historic West Side. And I have one suggestion. I really love to see a revolving loan fund established by the RDA that anyone who owns land or a home or a business can borrow from that fund so that we can begin to improve our properties and support our businesses. So that's my one request for funding. The other thing the RDA was supposed to do was to assist developers that would help provide jobs for people who actually live in the redevelopment agency area. In the beginning, there was a 50% goal, which we had a very difficult time achieving, but then we set up a 15% requirement for RDA jobs to support this target market, and yet we're not meeting those 15% goals. So we have some very specific ideas on how to achieve those goals, and I would just like to have a separate meeting with whoever's the appropriate person to suggest some activities that we can do to help the RDA reach its goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, let's go on to agenda item 4. Item 4, public hearing and discussion for possible action regarding fiscal year 2025 City of Las Vegas, tentative budget and fiscal year 2025, City of Las Vegas final budget, including the 5-year capital improvement plan, and this is in reference to all wards. And item 5 is public hearing and discussion for possible action regarding fiscal year 2025, City of Las Vegas Redevelopment Agency tentative budget and fiscal year 2025, City of Las Vegas Redevelopment Agency final budget. Redevelopment areas 1, 3, and 5, Knutson, Diaz, and Creer. And so, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We turn to the city manager.
Good morning, Mayor Goodman, members of City Council. Mike Jansen, City Manager. As we get started here, we'll just go down and introduce the team that's here today to walk you through the final budget that we're presenting to you today.
Hi, Gary Ameling, Chief Financial Officer.
Morning.
Good morning, Susan Heltzley, Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning.
Good morning, Steve Ford, Deputy City Manager.
Good morning. Let the show begin.
All right. Well, Mayor and Council, I want to start off and I want to say a few thank yous. This is quite the process, developing a budget for a city of our size, and we would not be here today without our entire CMO team's dedication to working on this budget for FY25. All of our directors and all of their staff, our incredible finance department, many of who are here in the audience, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say you, because the budget process is something where the feedback that you provide us helps us ensure that we work on a budget to bring to you on a day like today that captures those priorities, those needs, those things that will help us continue to be a great city. So I want to start off again just with really thanks. Walking you through how we got here today. In January, every year during the budget cycle, we have budget hearings with all the directors. And this January was similar to others in that directors come to those meetings and say, hey, these are the things I'd like to get if possible. And this year we had over 400 requests for expanded budget items. In that 400 requests were over 100 position requests, and if you added it all up, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of about $80 million of expanded budget requests. And so as we've had conversations with you all about, there's a lot of change this year compared to last and the prior. Last 2 budget cycles, we had a huge infusion of federal dollars, and those federal dollars are trailing off. And so throughout Southern Nevada, throughout the country, when you look at municipalities that are working on their budgets just like us, what you're hearing is that there's a reduction in the available funds that are being projected on the revenue side. And so because of that, again, as we've discussed, we were not able to say yes to a large part of those expanded budget requests. But I think what you're going to hear today is that we were able to incorporate those components of budget requests that we think are the right components to be adding. And we're going to walk you through that information today. After all those budget hearings, after all those budget hearings with the directors and trying to understand the whys and behind those wants, we have in March every year, we have a great budget workshop with you and go through similar information, walk you through the whys, the hows, and what we can or cannot accomplish from a financial standpoint. And those are really great meetings as well. And then after that March meeting, we go to fine-tune what we've heard, and we come back to you in April and present that tentative budget. That presentation to you was April 3rd, early in April. And between tentative and final, we usually have some adjustments, but we had something different happen this year. Only a few weeks after we presented to you the tentative budget, we were served notice with the decision by the Nevada Supreme Court that caused us to make not just some changes, but a lot of changes to be able to address that decision from the Nevada Supreme Court. So what you're going to see today is the normal changes we would typically make, but also the changes that were necessary to address that decision from the Nevada Supreme Court. I also think it's important for us to just look at where we are as a city, and so I tend to like to just compare us to some of our peers, and one of the best ways to compare us to our peers is where do we stand nationally as a city of our size. And so nationally, based on the latest census data, we are now the 24th largest city in the United States. That's saying something for just how much our city has grown, particularly for those of us who've been here for a while. I'm in my 28th year, and I've seen that growth at our city. And when you look at that, we're presenting a budget for the 24th largest city in the country that amounts to $2.25 billion. That's our total budget, all funds, and it amounts to a budget that supports almost 3,900 FTEs. That's when you take the full-time positions, the hourly positions, and the part-times. And again, just for appreciating where we are, it's interesting to note that as a city, we are now a bigger city than the city of Boston and the city of Detroit. They are smaller than us on a population level, and we are a little smaller than the city of El Paso, the city of Nashville, and Washington, D.C. So that's where we stand, just kind of as an overall perspective on what our city has been able to accomplish over the years. We just had a celebratory birthday for the city of Las Vegas, and I'm confident that we're going to continue to grow because we have a great city that people want to be in. So with that, I'd like to transition now to kind of an overall budget summary slide. And after this budget summary slide, I'll be transitioning the presentation to the rest of our team. So going down this list of budget summaries, a little bit of background on some of the items you see here. The fire training officer that we've added since the tentative budget to final. This is a position that was first discussed, a new model of having fire training officers, essentially full-time captain positions, rather than rotational captain positions. Through a lot of discussion with Chief Gray, this is a program that has been established over the last 2 budget cycles. 5 captains now, 5 fire training officers are full-time for the academy, as well as annual training needs for the fire department. In addition, a battalion chief. Again, previously, it was a constant rotation, so the consistency of the training that our recruits would see, that our rest of our fire team would see, would be a little bit different. And so the model that was discussed was the fire training officer, and so this, again, is the 5th one that we're adding to our overall fire training program. We've talked throughout the year a lot of discussion on the challenges for getting paramedics. And I'm happy to say that everyone has been listening to that. Everyone's been trying to come up with a strategy to be able to get more paramedics. And what you'll see here is over an 18-month period with this budget and dollars that are in this budget from, it's our special revenue fund that we get from fines related to AMR's ambulance contract. We're going to be able to put through over an 18-month period 60 additional students to become paramedics. That triples the average that we've ever had in the past. And so that's a significant impact on hearing what you've said, hearing what our current paramedics have said, having so much forced overtime. This is the way to help all those items. So again, very happy to say that the paramedic school is covered by general fund money that's in this final budget, along with some of those fines that we collect on the AMR franchise. We talk a lot about how many of our citizens will see activities late at night, where our graveyard DPS team provides a lot of support for some of those concerns that occur at night, some illegal activity in our parks, just a variety of quality of life items that we'd like to be able to respond to in a timely manner. And so looking at those calls throughout the year, what we've added here is 2 additional positions, 2 additional marshals to the graveyard shift that we think will, again, allow us to continue to be responsive to the needs of our community. On that same token, last year we added a new program in DPS called Problem-Oriented Policing Team. This team has been getting great coverage throughout our community. They're really engaging with business owners. They're engaging with our tourists. It's a daytime shift, and a lot of the activity that they work on helps us minimize some negative activity that can occur at night. So with this budget, we're proposing to expand the problem-oriented policing team. It's going to allow us to continue south on Las Vegas Boulevard, say from the main Fremont Street area, to also get into areas along the Arts District and really trying to capture that tourist corridor and work with all the business owners that are in those areas. So a program that we had not looked at until Chief Potts arrived, and we think it's paying good dividends now. It's going to be even better. Have to spend a little time talking about the Animal Foundation contract, a part of our community. Animal services are so near and dear to so many people. I know I've had many conversations with Councilwoman Seaman on this, and many of you as well. And so this was an important, one of the first real big things for us to resolve was getting that contract in a position that can allow us to complete the terms of that contract. It amounted to about $1 million being added for the operation of that contract, but also very key was $15 million for us to take possession of the current shelter, which allows us to have the most flexibility in our destiny going forward. And additionally, around that same conversation on the animal services side, we also identified a need for our APS team to have some additional support. And by that, we've entered into a couple of small contracts for microchipping, which was tied to a new ordinance that was passed on the value of microchipping to our community. So we've added contracts with Hearts Alive and Heaven Can Wait, so they can provide some additional support to our APS team for not just microchipping, but also for veterinary services that may pop up throughout the year. So again, a big investment in our animal protective services and the programs that, again, they're so near and dear to our community. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the return of our canines. This is a program we had many years ago during the Great Recession. It was eliminated. Everyone absolutely loves our new canines, but the reality is they're going to be providing services that are so important related to bomb sniffing, related to gun detection, and a host of other elements that, again, are going to, your number one priority, that's why they're on here, is public safety. And then I have to mention how we leverage every year the private security industry. There's only so many places we can be at all different hours of day and week. And so this year we've added budget to have additional private security support, essentially some augmentation of our current staffers. As an example, we use private security to patrol around our city hall, around our courthouse. This budget adds additional private security capacity to service the Civic Plaza across the street, and a host of other needs that pop up throughout the year. So again, all tied to those major public safety priorities. Shifting over to healthcare, we had a terrific, successful pilot program for the community ambulance, contract ambulance service. And out of that pilot is what you see here in this budget. It's a $3.5 million expansion to the contract ambulance service. And that pilot was successful because it did a couple of really key things. Number one, it helped reduce forced overtime on our paramedics who had an incredible amount of workload. So we had great support from the fire union because the contract ambulance service is helping them with a concern that they had related to all that forced overtime. Secondly, it's allowing us to generate quite a bit of additional revenue from the Medicare reimbursement side. So essentially, those reimbursements are allowing us to pay for this program. And then third, what it's allowing us to do is have our team, who is the most trained and just really the best of the best, allows them to focus on those most serious calls and allows the contract ambulance service to go to some of those lower priority calls. As an example, last year, we responded to over 12,000 calls that were crisis response calls. This contract ambulance service, the expanded one, is going to allow us to respond to those contract ambulance service calls tied to the crisis response 911, and again, let our team focus on heart attack calls, major car accidents, strokes, things of that nature. So all in all, I'm just really excited for the value of this program going forward. We had a lot of conversation on our courtyard and how we've invested heavily in that facility, but we were at a point in time where we needed a new vendor, and so we went out for an RFP. We have a new vendor at the Homeless Resource Center. That contract, like all of our contracts, because of just the huge increase in everything, went up to $7.1 million a year. That's how much it's costing to run the Homeless Resource Center. But I will say, out of that $3 million increase, We added additional services that our prior vendor was not contracted to provide, and that includes something that we've all talked about so much about. It's the behavioral health support. Many of our folks that come to that courtyard need behavioral health support. Our prior contract didn't have that. So that cost, while it went up, we've added more services to try to help folks that need that specific type of service. And then last but not least, on the healthcare side, we've had a lot of discussion on the money that we were getting from the settlements related to the opioid lawsuits. And as we had in briefings just a few weeks ago, this has been added since the tentative to final, because now we've presented to you all our recommended investment of close to $3 million to help with folks that are needing treatment and services and support surrounding the opioid side of the healthcare. So again, hitting on the healthcare side, and then jumping over to diversifying our economy. We've talked a lot with Governor's Office of Economic Development, the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, the medical industry, and what we keep hearing time and time again as we talk about trying to diversify our economy, one of the biggest areas of opportunity is in the biotech world. Thousands and thousands of jobs have popped up throughout the country because communities have been able to lure the biotech industry. We have very, very little, and based on our research, based on the work done from our great Ryan Smith, this is an opportunity that we need to go after. And so one of the ways to do that is having the Redevelopment Agency have the funding capacity for establishing a biotech innovation center and lab space. There's a couple of different ways to do that. One is we build a space and have an operator. Another is we contract through an RFP to have someone do it. So we're looking at both options, but the point is we have a successful redevelopment agency that is going to allow us to invest in this type of a program. We talk all about the importance of education on our community, and I'd be remiss if I didn't spend a few minutes to just talk about all the great educational things that are coming to our city. For many years, we've planned for the CSN Northwest campus, and this last legislative session was a huge change in momentum on that project. We got $4 million allocated for the planning and engineering associated with that campus. In addition, in our capital funds, we've allocated $500,000 towards some of the infrastructure that site is going to need. That's going to pay off huge dividends to us as that project moves to the next level of development. Workforce training centers. We talk all about how many companies that are interested in moving to Southern Nevada, they're not sure if we have the right skill sets. And so through a great partnership with Dr. Zaragoza from CSN, we've been able to secure funding for workforce training centers. And it's an exciting piece of our overall educational program because tomorrow we are having, actually no, it's next week. Next week we're having a groundbreak for a $14 million CSN Workforce Training Center in the historic West Side. We recently were notified that we are getting an additional EDA grant for an East Las Vegas training center. And then last but not least, as we've got those two working in different phases of development, we're working on an additional workforce training center in the medical district to create the training programs to help all of the workforce that's healthcare supportive positions. So, you know, a great focused area on so many of our team members to try to make our residents successful and to be able to take advantage of those job opportunities that require other levels of skills. I want to talk a little bit about additional diversifying our economy. What we saw throughout the pandemic and what we've heard from companies across the nation and across the world for that matter is companies can have workers work remotely anywhere. Las Vegas is a great place for them to come and work remotely, but what we heard is that many of our communities don't have the level of broadband service that is ideal for luring those types of workers. And so we're lucky enough to have worked with you on a franchise with AT&T Gigapower. They're investing hundreds of millions of dollars in our community, and now right behind them is Google. A connected city is a city that can really perform well. I think there's an opportunity for us to become one of the most connected communities in the nation with these partnerships that we have going on. I want to move to other highlights of the overall budget that you're going to be hearing from today. In this budget, you're going to see 39 new positions are proposed to be added. We're also taking ARPA positions where that funding is running out. The time is now for us to convert those ARPA positions to general fund or other source funds as that ARPA money runs out. There's 26 positions, if you will, on the ARPA side that we're converting. But the point is, 39 are the new positions that you're seeing today, and that's significantly less than the last 2 budget cycles for the same reason we've talked about earlier. We just don't have the luxury of increasing revenues to add more than that. And as just an aside, FY23, we added 127 positions. FY24, we added 70. Here today, we're presenting 39. And if I had to guess, FY26, you'll see that continuing to trail down. That's just the nature of our national and local economy. A little bit of discussion on the Civic Plaza. Our wonderful Civic Plaza, with all of your support, is going to be opening its entirety in spring of next year. We had a great ceremony earlier this year for the topping off of the last bucket of concrete. That's a project that's going to mean so much for our community and for our city staff, because as you know, we've got staff all over sprinkled about. We're going to be able to bring everyone to the campus. So this budget includes the staffing and equipment support that's going to be necessary to ensure that the Civic Plaza becomes a great amenity, that we have the budget to cover the new utility costs for those buildings, a host of things that just comes with a project of that nature. We talked throughout the year, almost every contract that we have has been seeing the inflationary pressure. One of the highest has been utility costs. So you'll see here, this budget covers the contractual and inflationary increases. Every one of us has been looking at our utility bills, whether it's gas, power, water. They've all gone up. Of course, we're seeing it because we have a lot of facilities that we own and operate. And then I wanted to end this summary with the importance of giving our employees the tools they need to be successful. And we had a situation where we have almost 20 positions in animal protective services. We have 17 officers and 3 supervisors. Some of them were sharing the vehicles that they run on their shift. They come in, they hand the keys off, and they continue running those vehicles. Those vehicles were breaking down because of, you know what our weather's like in the summer. And so in this budget, we've added 5 additional vehicles dedicated to animal protective services. Those are not cheap vehicles. They're close to $700,000 to be fully retrofit and have the dollars for operations and maintenance. And so that's my snapshot to you all of this FY25 budget. And with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Gary to start working you through the next bunch of slides.
Thank you, Mike, and again, for the record, it's Gary Ameling, Chief Financial Officer. I echo Mike's comments about thanking all of the folks that are involved in the process. Not only does it touch so many people in our organization who work so hard on the process, but it also lasts a very long time. So many of the people in the audience have been working on this FY25 budget going back into last calendar year and last fall. And so thank you very much to all of them, and many of them, again, are sitting in the audience today. First up, we're going to talk a little bit about the current fiscal year, which comes to an end next month on June 30th. Fiscal year 24, we're going to focus on the general fund portion of the fiscal year 24 budget. And this is a quick summary of the revenues and expenditures year to date and where we think we're going to end up at the end of this fiscal year. First up, looking at the revenues, we anticipate revenues will be greater than budget by about $64.6 million. This is up about $41.5 million from the tentative budget presentation last month. And there's a couple of anomalies that we're running through the general fund that don't typically take place every year, and so I'll point out some of those as we go through the presentation. First, looking at C-Tax, which, as you know, is our largest revenue source for the general fund. We're estimating that we'll end the year about $7 million ahead of budget. This is up a couple $2 million from the tentative budget presentation. So C-Tax has performed slightly better than expectations this year. It's a base of about $400 million, so we're a couple % above budget, we think, at the end of this year. Franchise fees, our year-end estimate is to be about $12.8 million ahead of budget at the end of the year. Again, as Mike just pointed out, gas and electric prices were up quite a bit this year, and as those payments are made to those utility companies, they pay the 5% city franchise fee, and so our franchise fees are up as well. We did transfer $26.5 million into the general fund as revenue replacement under the American Rescue Plan Act. That's up from the previous number in the tentative budget by $22.9 million. These are agreements that you approved to transfer from ARPA funding to general funding. That allows additional flexibility, but that money then flows from the ARPA Special Revenue Fund into the general fund, and then the general fund makes the expenditure to the recipients. And so you'll see that show up on both sides. It ends up being neutral overall, but it does take a couple of years to run through the general fund, so it throws our numbers off a little bit. Looking at another one-time anomaly, we did receive and did expend on the same day $13.6 million to facilitate a land transfer between the Bureau of Land Management and a third party. This is for the property at Alta and Hualapai. So that $13.6 million ran through the general fund as a revenue as well as an expenditure. Turning attention now to the expenditure side of the general fund budget, we are expecting to end the year about $102 million over budget. Fortunately, we have excess beginning fund balance as well as additional revenue in fiscal year 24 that's covering that amount, although we do see a small decrease in our ending reserves, which we'll show you on the table a little bit later in the presentation. Services and supplies and capital outlays category is projected to exceed budget by $38 million. Again, most of that is due to those two anomalies that I mentioned earlier. $39 million is flowing through for ARPA projects, and the Bureau of Land Management land transfer, $13.6 million expenditure for that acquisition. Salaries and benefits, which is the largest portion of our general fund budget, is running under budget by about $7.1 million. And so, as you know, we have vacancies throughout the year. We do assume a 3% vacancy factor throughout the year, but if there's additional savings due to additional vacancies, that generally does result in general fund savings. And then we did transfer, our transfers are higher than budget. We transferred $11.5 million to capital projects and $60 million to the Liability and Property Damage Internal Service Fund. Again, as the city manager mentioned, that's related to the Nevada Supreme Court order. So turning now to fiscal year 25 budget, this is the general fund summary highlights page. On the revenue side, overall revenues, comparing the year-end projections for 24, which again have some anomalies in them, to what we're projecting for fiscal year 25, it's an overall decrease in revenues of 2.8%. If not for those ARPA monies and the Bureau of Land Management land sale flowing through the general fund, we actually would be up by 2.1% for revenues compared to the current year if you take those things out. CTAX, we're expecting a small increase for next year. As city manager mentioned, a lot of money flowed through our economy related to the recovery from the pandemic. That seems to be normalizing now, and so we're expecting to see slower CTAX collections moving forward into next year. So we're projecting a $5 million increase, or 1.1% ahead of what we think we're going to end the year at this year. On the property tax side, as you know, there are state caps on property tax collections, and although our property assessed valuations are up 10% for next year, we're going to expect to see a 4.5%, or about $6 million increase in property tax collections. And those tax caps for residential are 3%, and for non-residential are 8%. And so the amount that's the differential between what we're going to see in collection increases and the assessed valuation increases is what's known as abated property tax that we would have collected if not for those caps. And that amount has been increasing the last several years. And the general fund portion of that is $65.6 million. We'll look at the total property tax collections on a chart in just a couple of slides. Licenses and franchise collections, we're expecting an increase of about 2.1%. And then here's another category of several revenue categories lumped together that has these anomalies built into them. The fines and charges for services and other revenues combined are expected to decrease about 15.1% next year. And again, that's because fiscal year 24 includes those monies from the land sale as well as some of the ARPA money that flow through. So this category would actually be up 4.7% if not for those one-time things. And in this category also is included our general fund portion of our Medicaid reimbursement monies. We're expecting next year to collect about $28 million of Medicaid reimbursement monies. About $8 million of them flow to the general fund, and then we have about $20 million programmed for capital replacement. Contribution to the redevelopment agency, this is an annual line item. The redevelopment agency is going to contribute $3.1 million to the general fund next fiscal year, and that's for services provided in the redevelopment project areas. And then the transfers category, here's where we see a large decrease of 61% because we will not have, again, those American Rescue Plan monies flowing into the general fund. So looking at the general fund revenues in a pie chart, here you can see that by and far, the consolidated tax is the largest revenue source for the city's general fund, bringing in about $442 million, or about 55% of overall general fund revenues of our total budget of $804 million of revenues expected next year. Property tax is the second largest category, expected to bring in about $17.7 million. This is the general fund share of our regular property tax monies that flows through from the county. So to combine those two bring in a little bit less than 3/4 of the general fund revenues, about 73%. Licenses and franchises is the next largest category at $121 million, and then other revenues make up the final piece of about 12.2%, or about $99 million. Looking a little bit more detail at the largest revenue source, again, about 55% of our budget comes from consolidated tax. Here you see a history of about 16 years, and really the story kind of started a little bit before this left side of the chart, and that was with the Great Recession. And so we always point out how economically sensitive C-tax collections are, because when the economy goes into a recession, C-tax collections can actually see declines from prior years, and that happened back during the Great Recession. Our peak prior to the Great Recession in fiscal year 2006 was $264 million. Over the next 4 years, we saw declines 4 years in a row, and you can see the last of those declines at the left side of this chart, dropping to a $201.5 million number in fiscal year 2010. That was a decline of $62.8 million, or 23.8% of our largest revenue source. And so we always try to pay attention to it, because if it happened again, we'd have to have reserves to back it up, or we'd have to do pretty extensive reductions in costs to be able to handle that sort of reduction. So we're always keeping a close eye on it. It took 10 years to get back to that level from fiscal year 2006, so it can take a long time. COVID pandemic, you can see kind of toward the right side of the chart here, did also reduce C-tax collections in fiscal year 2021. Fiscal year 2020, C-tax collections dropped 12.8 million, or 4% from the prior fiscal year. And then you can see how fast it came back, and that was significantly mitigated by the federal monies that flowed through the economy. We do now expect, as you see on the right side of the chart, slower growth for the next couple of years. Looking now at our second largest revenue source, property taxes, it's about 18% of our general fund, and it's subject to the tax caps, which limit the growth. Again, we saw a similar story, although a couple years of a lag from the C-tax collections because of the timing of when property tax collections hit. We did see a real dollar decline. In fiscal year 2009, we peaked at $134.7 million, declined 5 years in a row, down to $88.2 million. This was a decrease of 34.5%, an even higher number than what we saw in C-tax, or a drop of $46.5 million that came out of the general fund's revenues. It took 14 years to get back to the level we were at based on those caps in the state law. And so that's the slides that I'm going to cover, and I'll be back at the end to cover a few of the wrap-up slides, and I'm going to turn it over to Susan.
Thank you, Gary. Susan Helsley again for the record. So I do want to make sure I thank the nice people sitting behind me, my finance team. They're from budget, capital, grants, our payroll team. They all worked really hard on this budget. So huge shout out to them. As Gary was saying, some of them have been working on this since November. So it's a year-round process for us. So getting into our FY25 expenditure highlights, Metro has an increase at 6.6%. This is down $4 million, or they were asking for 10% in our original budget. They reduced their request by about $4 million. So this particular request covers 36 additional civilian positions. They have 23 additional commission positions within their budget. It does not include the 100 commission positions that they're adding from the More Cops Initiative and the Crime Prevention Fund Acts. Majority, the rest of their ask is for COLAs, increased workers' comp, and they're also seeing the increased vehicle and equipment maintenance charges that we are. As Mike mentioned, we are including the Animal Foundation increase going into this budget. We renegotiated their contract, taking them till the end of June 30th, 2025, so they're good for another year. It also includes Civic Plaza staffing, security, supplies, programming, and utility costs. As Mike mentioned, the building will be fully opened next spring, so in order to have it fully open, we have to make sure that we can staff it and pay for its utility costs and everything else that goes along with it. We're also increasing the operating costs for the Homeless Resource Center. We've added the ARPA positions, there's 24 full-time and 2 hourly positions that are funded under ARPA that are being transferred back to the general fund. Those are across different departments here. And it also responds to inflationary cost increases on utilities and services and supplies. And then another thing that we're working on is this is just the recap of where our collective bargaining agreements are at. We've got PPA and POA, those are valid through 6/30/2025. Our IAFF and CEA, they're valid through the end of this calendar, our fiscal year, so 6/30/24. And then POSA is also valid through 6/30/26. So we are in negotiations with both IAFF and the CEA. So this is the slide that I really like sharing with you guys. This shows all of our budget changes from tentative to final. So Mike was mentioning that we had a total of 39 positions in this particular budget. We're adding 10 from tentative to final, 6 in the general fund, 4 in the other funds. So on the general fund side, we're adding a behavioral health clinician. This person will be in HR, but they're going to be working with our first responders. So they will be someone that we make sure is culturally competent, that they understand the needs of both of our fire and our DPS folks. So if they need some additional assistance, they can go and get it confidentially. So we're really happy to be able to add that. We're also adding a deputy city attorney in the attorney shop. Now, this is a really interesting position. RDA has been contracting with a real estate attorney for 20 years now, and he's retiring. And we were trying to decide, do we continue to contract or do we hire? So we will be hiring the attorney. The RDA will be paying for it, but it will reside in the city attorney's office. The next one is we're adding an EMS field coordinator. This is a fire captain position. And the EMS coordinators, they're the folks that work with those contract ambulance services that Mike was describing. We have one per shift. And they were telling us, and fire was telling us, it gets really super busy and they really need more help. So we've added another position that's kind of a rover. They'll determine where they need that position, which shift is most important. We're doing it as a pilot, so if it's successful, as we sure it will be, most likely we'll be adding another one of these positions next budget cycle. We're also adding an event planner. This is to help out our special events team. Christy and Jasmine, they have worked on over 300 events this year, or I think it was last year, 400 events this year, and it's coming up on 500 events that this two-person team does. So this is a very important position to help take some of the pressure off of them. I'm sure they think the same thing, Councilman. We're also adding a fire equipment mechanic. We have two fire equipment mechanics. Both of them, I believe, are ready to retire. It's always a great idea to get someone on early so they can be trained. This is a very specialized position. Our fire trucks, as you know, are quite large and they cost a lot of money to keep up, so that we're happy to add that. We're also adding a management analyst too. This is going to help out the DPS department as a volunteer coordinator and community outreach. Fire has someone that works on their side, so we're listening to council, and you guys were like, hey, we really could use this on the DPS side. So we are adding this management analyst to do some outreach and volunteer coordination to help out our DPS folks. And then on our other funds, we're adding 4 positions in one of our internal service funds. This is our fire communications team. We're adding another communications supervisor and then 3 fire communications specialists. So that, I believe, adds another shift or just expands what they have right now, so for our 911 center. So you can see on the bottom of the slide, we were at 29. This, in the final, we're adding the 10 to bringing us up to, we're rounding, it's 38.67. We have a 2/3 employee in one of our HR ISFs, but we're rounding up to 39. So as Mike said, down significantly from the last 2 years in the positions that we're adding. So during the time between tentative and final, we go in and we make some last minute tweaks. So one of the things that we do is we rerun our staffing plan. So we ran it as of the end of April, and it picks up any positions, if people have retired, if we've added new people, if they've gotten promotions during that time. So we redo our staffing plan. That added about $1 million to our costs. We also, again, we adjusted our metro contract to the final budget request, which saved us $3.5 million. We adjusted some costs in DPS. We noticed that we had some vehicles that we added with ARPA funds last year. So they had the vehicles, they just didn't have the money for their operation costs. So we added the operation costs for that. And then when DPS originally came in with their budget requests, the numbers for they always ask for a vehicle. and the vehicles were pretty pricey. So we went back and said, hey, can we sharpen our pencils a little bit? So we brought down the vehicle costs. Instead of getting four-wheel drive Tahoes, we found some nice two-wheel drive, because, we don't have a lot of off-roading in downtown, so I think we'll be okay. So we ended up adding at $15,000, so not a huge cost. We also transferred we're transferring $25 million to the liability insurance and property damage fund in this fiscal year. We want to increase our reserves in that fund. So along with increasing our reserves, we're also going to increase our spending authority just in case we need to access those reserves. And then we also increased our citywide contracted security support by $250,000. So this pie chart shows our general fund expenditures. You can see that salaries and benefits, as Gary was saying, is our highest of 47.6. So here's a really fun fact. You'll notice that what we pay to Metro is $180 million, or 21.9%. If we split out what we pay Metro into salaries and benefits and non-labor, our salaries and benefits would actually be $543.1 million, or 65.7% of our budget. So you can see how most of our budget is very personnel driven. Our non-labor would then be $206 million, or about 25% of the general fund. And this next slide, we put our general fund expenditures of the $826.5 million, we put those into our functions. And the functions are actually dictated to us by GFOA, which is the Government Financial Officers Association. They tell us these are the functions you're going to use. And so what is always interesting to me is when you look at our public works, it's only 1.4%. Most of the people who work in public works, they charge their time to either our fleet, our facilities, internal service funds, our sanitation enterprise fund, and a vast majority of them actually live in the public safety function. So it's kind of a misnomer. So of course, public safety is our largest piece of the pie at 61.4%. And then you can see how the rest of the functions shake out. And here is our general fund final budget. This 3 columns shows our 23 actuals, our 24 estimates, and then our 25 final. So our 24 estimate, as you can see, we are estimating that our unrestricted fund balance percent will be 25.1%. We've got a shortfall of 28.7 million. We talked it through a little bit earlier that we've got the $60 million that we're transferring out to the ISF to take care of our Supreme Court order that we need to take care of. And FY25, we also have the $25 million that we're moving into the ISF. So we're submitting a deficit budget going into FY25. So we're tapping into our reserves this year. So we try to keep them at 25%. That's our policy. We'll be at 23.3% going into this next budget year. And this is always the scary slide, as we like to say, is we look really green and then it falls to red. So as we just discussed, in FY24, we'll see a deficit of 28.7 million. And FY25, we're estimating 22.2 million deficit. We bounce back up in 26 and 27, so we're estimating a $10.7 million surplus, about flat in FY27, and then in 28 to 30, we start seeing where the expenses start outrunning our revenues. And as you know, we estimate our revenues very conservatively, roughly 3% going forward, and our expenses come out to about 4.5%. So eventually they will catch up, where they're going to start crossing and going into that deficit zone. We do keep a very close eye going on as we get closer to these fiscal years, just to make sure that we're staying within our policies, we're making sure we stay within our revenue and whatnot. So this is a slide that I just want to touch base on. We have our fiscal stabilization special revenue fund. We had set that up back in 2020, and under a resolution, it was May 20 of 2020 to set it up, and we transferred some money into it. It's from our property tax money. We also put it in as what we call our rainy day fund. Because of our Supreme Court order, we had to remove money from our capital funds in FY24. We were originally going to transfer $55 million into capital in 24. We'll be doing it in 25, and instead of taking it out of the general fund, we're going to use the fiscal stabilization special revenue fund. And so I just wanted to make you aware. The transfers are necessary. 15 million of this transfer is to pay for the animal shelter building. We also have about $25 million in bid reserve that we need to replenish because, as you know, with inflation and whatnot, our capital projects have been running over budget. So very, very important transfer that we need to make. So we just had to do a little bit of rejiggering of the budget to make sure that we had everything correct to cover our Supreme Court order. And I am going to turn it over to Steve.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Good morning again, Steve Ford, Deputy City Manager. Going to go quickly over our capital budget, the capital improvement plan for FY25. This first slide, if you recall, just shows our revenue and the sources that we receive funding for our capital projects. This listing of funding sources, some of them have, as you recall, have some constraints on them. For example, residential construction tax, I'm sure everyone is aware, can only be used for parks. The 5/7 ad valorem can only be used for facilities. So there are some constraints on the use of these funds. One of the things that we spend a lot of time on is the reallocation of existing project funding. That's projects that have closed, that have a balance left over that we can reallocate to other projects. And the next slide, the major projects that we're going, if you recall, we are going to spend a lot of resources this year in finishing projects that we've already started. We have when I first became city engineer a few years ago, we had a history making 35 new projects, almost 40 new projects that we put forth, and now it's time as we start to dwindle into that to finish the projects that we've started. So the major projects that we'll be working on, Cragen Park in Ward 1, we just opened bids on that, and as was mentioned, came in quite a bit higher than was originally budgeted, so we'll be adding some money to that. Angel Park improvements in Ward 2, the Strong Start Charter School expansion in Ward 3 to increase the number of classrooms there. The Bunker Park Regional Pickleball Complex to finish off that project. The Hears Park improvements in Ward 5, and then the Centennial Hills Community Center pool improvements. We're adding $4 million. There was already money added last year for that project, and we're adding more so we can finish off that project completely. As one of the council priorities for capital for public safety, we're spending quite a bit of resources this year in FY25 on public safety projects. The animal shelter building was mentioned. The new substation in the Providence Sky Canyon area, a partnership with Metro to put a new model substation in that area. We'll be working with Metro on that project. The 911 multi-agency facility is $13 million, half of which, a little over half, was budgeted last year. We're adding to it this year. I understand that design is going to be starting on that soon through Metro. We have the fire EMS apparatus and equipment replacements for things that have reached the end of their useful life. Fire Training Center rehab has been a multi-year project, and it is getting some additional funding this year to finish that off. I'm personally very excited about Fire Station 103, 3-bay replacement, Fire Station 103 on Upland. I've worked on, in my days as a facility manager, for many years, and I'm very happy to get going on a new replacement for that project in Ward 1. We're spending $500,000 this year to start the final design and take that to design to get that going. And then the perimeter fencing security upgrades relates to our fire chief, and we're working to keep our firefighters safe while they're on duty around their stations. So the changes from tentative budget, we had very, very minor changes, but looking at what we have going on, especially in the medical district, the parking garage, $150,000, that does not appear to be a lot of money, but what that will do will get us started. If we begin the project to go forward, we'll have the money to start an initial design and perhaps some what we call bridging documents if we decide to go with the design build delivery method. And so we put some money toward that. And then again, listening to input from council for we need to increase our art money a little bit. We're putting some money in this public art master plan implementation. This is different than the 1% for the arts line item. What this will do is we'll create a second line item that we can use for public art projects that would not otherwise be covered by the 1% program. So that will give us a little bit more flexibility in the spending. So with that, our capital improvement plan is $142.2 million, which is up slightly from tentative. Does not include projects that are funded from outside sources. And then by category, the facilities, general government, 62.5, Parks and Rec, that's up by 4.8 million. Parks and Rec up by $500,000 for the public arts plan. And then there is no change for the public safety. The discretionary and council discretionary RCT was increased by $1 million just from an increase in the regional or residential construction tax, road flood technology, municipal parking. So we added the 2 projects. So in the tentative, we had 19. We now have 21 new projects listed on the capital plan. And with that, I will turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, Gare. Mayor and Council, one of the changes that I implemented and taken on the role of city manager is hearing what your priorities were. I felt it was appropriate to change the structure of how the Economic and Urban Development Department reported to the city manager. And so with my taking on the position, I made a change to where the director of the Economic and Urban Development Department is a direct report to the city manager so that I can be as closely aligned with our economic development goals and be able to respond perhaps more quickly and more strategically. And so I'll say I was lucky enough to have a good period of time in this role with former Director Ryan Smith and subsequently with Dina Babsky. And what I wanted to walk you through today are a couple of really great highlights that I really want to attribute to the efforts of our entire economic development team as it relates to our redevelopment agency. And as you know, the redevelopment agencies are something that comes out of both federal and state law, where a certain area is designated as a redevelopment area, and with that comes a whole host of economic potential incentives. And those incentives are what sometimes drives investment. And these first 2 bullets that you see here, to me, are really impressive, showing how much growth we've seen in our assessed valuation for buildings that are within the redevelopment area, and then the actual tax increment increase that is coming with all of that increase in assessed valuation. Just as a normal run of math, you know, a property usually has about 1% of their valuation that ends up being turning into tax. And so that's the money that makes our RDA hum and perform. And so why is this happening? What is behind this? Well, we are seeing an incredible amount of growth in investment for major projects, but also a lot of small projects that added up are just showing this surge in assessed value and tax increment revenue. I want to just give you a couple of examples so you can appreciate just what it looks like. I had a conversation yesterday with Southern Land Company. They have been truly, truly huge supporters of our community. They love developing in Southern Nevada and in the city of Las Vegas. And what they told me is that all told, their investment now, they have a project that just started construction in the Arts District. They have 2 projects under construction in Symphony Park, and they completed a project in Symphony Park not long ago. Their investment in our community is now reaching $600 million. So you go back to that 1% is the property tax that comes with that. That's $6 million that's coming back onto the RDA side as it relates to that tax increment increase. And that's because all the projects they're doing, they were previously vacant lots. And so incredible partnership that we've had with the Southern Lands team. And I'm just thrilled that we've been able to grow that relationship and see them continue to invest. another relationship that was nurtured along all through the COVID period, where it was really hard to fund financing for hotels for a period of time, but we got it through the finish line, and that's the Jackson Shaw Partnership for a great new 441-room hotel immediately adjacent to the Smith Center. And it's going up fast. If you drive by there, it is coming out of the ground super quick. That's a $150 million investment that is just great to see. Cedar Street, we have a groundbreaking tomorrow in the Arts District for a team out of Chicago. They're originally based in Chicago. They're doing great residential projects all over the country. And guess what? They found Southern Nevada, they found Las Vegas. They're doing the project in the Arts District, breaking ground tomorrow. And later this fall will be a groundbreaking in the Medical District for their second project. The Arts District project having a groundbreak tomorrow is $180 million. I have to mention one of our developers who's done so many projects, continues to invest in our community, and that's Sam Cherry. Sam Cherry had a groundbreaking recently in the historic West Side for the Share West Side project, and he's been a great partner for so many years, and he continues to invest in our community. And I mentioned dozens of other projects. So many projects in the RDA are taking a vacant building and fully rebuilding it, repurposing it to something that really is becoming an amenity for our community. And at the end of the day, that's why you're seeing that assessed value go up, and we're going to continue to do our very best to ensure that that trend continues. Talk a little bit about the medical district, and the new UNLV Medical School is the igniter that ignites all investment. Anywhere you look in the country where there's been a medical school added, what comes behind it is investment, and we are seeing a lot of that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't just mention the huge investments that are being made by so many different areas of UNLV, so many areas of UMC, Southern Nevada Health District. I just met with last week for a $12 million lab expansion that they're going to be advancing. We have a beautiful new memory care facility by Lumina on Charleston. We have Dr. Spiritos's Women's Cancer Center going up in record speed. You go by there every day, another floor is up. And then we have a number of mixed-use development projects, one by a group called Parting Seas, and just so many others. And I have to mention the effort of the city investing $150 million in infrastructure. No medical district is successful if it doesn't have the supporting infrastructure to make it an area that is inviting, that can handle the traffic, that is comfortable day and night, and that's what our investment is going to do as part of that overall medical district investment. I have to mention Symphony Park. What a wonderful development we've had going in Symphony Park. And last week we had Myron Martin here speaking about all the great things that occurred through the Smith Center. And that project is a catalyst project. I have to mention what's going on there. I mentioned earlier Southern Land. We have a great project coming from Red Ridge Development by the Cello Tower. Mentioned the Jackson Shaw Hotel. Have to mention the Elaine Wynn Art Museum. And then working with the Ruvo Center and Cleveland Clinic on what we think will be a great expansion project. Just so many great things occurring in Symphony Park. And when you look at our RDA, there's incentive programs that we've had for many years, like the Visual Improvement Program, been very successful. You've seen many RDA agenda items where we've worked with the property owner to do some enhancements on the exterior. A project and program that we started during COVID was the Safety Security Grant Program. We've been issuing many grants associated with that program. And then this year, we're adding 2 new projects. Again, we're listening to the developers, we're listening to the community, and what they're saying is special events are important downtown because they just give that energy for special events. But a lot of them are going to go away if we can't find a way to bridge the gap on the increasing costs for public safety. So those special events is what makes downtown great and what makes folks like Southern Land want to invest in our community. So we found a way to create a public safety support program where we'll partner with some of the special events to help offset some of the costs for Metro, for our fire department, things of that nature. The second thing that we've heard time and time again from our developers, from our property owners is that power is so expensive. We have a lot of old infrastructure downtown, particularly on the power side, some very old substations, and whenever a new project comes on, more than likely they have to spend quite a bit of money on power upgrades. So we've added a program this year that we're calling a Power Line and Power Service Upgrade Program, where we'll partner with projects like we do on some of the other programs to help get those to the finish line. We think that's going to have a good return on investment where we'll see a lot more projects coming to the finish line. And then the big add for this year that was not in last year, that was not in the prior year, is we're projecting the need to issue up to $50 million in bonds through the RDA, and that is largely attributable to the work of great Ryan Smith and his team over the last number of years. Many major projects that we believe are getting to the finish line in this fiscal year, so we want to be ready for that. We're going to continue to see if we can make them hit the finish line. I want to just give you kind of a snapshot of those projects that we think are getting there. Certainly the Cashman redevelopment project, the Grant Sawyer site is one. The old City Hall option land will soon have almost 10 acres of land, prime land for a great redevelopment project there. Numerous museum projects. There's multiple museums that are looking to expand. We have the Elaine Wynn Museum. We have the Neon Museum looking to relocate. We have the Mob Museum looking to expand. A lot of activity on the museum front. So there's going to be a spot for us to participate to make those projects add more value to downtown. I mentioned the biotech wet lab. And then also one of our big partners downtown, Stephen Mulaski's done major land assemblages along the main commerce area. We think we're getting close to where there could be a really great project in that location. So again, all told, we think there's a need to add to our budget the projected issuance of a $50 million RDA bond. This will be like all of our other bond issuances, where we would be having separate agenda items that we would bring to you through the RDA, through City Council for further consideration and debate on the merits of those bonds. But for today, we want to essentially say we think the need is going to be there in FY25, so we're capturing it in this budget. I want to mention the funds that we get from the RDA towards maintenance. They allocate $3.1 million a year in this budget. In prior years, we added a CPI increase, so that amount is kind of to go up slightly each year. That's for certain items related to the RDA area for maintenance. It's, maintenance of cleaning streets, things of that nature. And then we continue to have success stories at our innovation centers. This was something that the Redevelopment Agency started in partnership with our IT team, our Director of Innovation and Technology, Michael Sherwood, and we continue to see these facilities be something that continues to draw more interest in setting up shop downtown. Going over to the slide that actually shows the numbers for the Redevelopment Agency, you know, I think what stands out to me is that FY23 actual, where you see the tax increment value was $31 million, and you'll see the FY25 budget, it's now near $39 million. That's a 25% increase over those two budget cycles. That is just a reflection of how much investment we're seeing in the redevelopment area, and again, something to be really proud of. We don't talk too often about the 18% set-aside that you'll see comes off of the top of that tax increment funding, but as a reminder, what that 18% set-aside goes towards is educational activities, programs, and facilities, and then 9% goes to affordable housing. So that comes right off the top, dollars generated in the RDA that go to those specific programs. The last items on this slide that I want to just point out is when you see the FY25 budget, where you'll see other contributions, $53.8 million. That's because it's reflecting our anticipation of issuing a $50 million bond. It also has things like interest that we generate, some rental income, things of that nature. Going a little bit further down the slide, you see debt service of $10 million. I think a lot of people don't know, and again, tying it to Myron Martin's presentation last week, the RDA issued an over $80 million bond in support of the Smith Center. That jewel of the Smith Center is there in many ways because the RDA came to the table with a significant amount of funding. We pay about $5 to $6 million a year debt related to that bond issuance, but we all know the return on investment is almost uncalculable, how good that has been for our community. And then again, when you go down, you'll see the expenditures, that's $74.6 million. That's us anticipating that that $50 million bond will be issued. That includes some money that we anticipate for strategic land acquisition, as well as some contributions to our parking program, marketing, things of that nature. All told, the picture for our redevelopment agency is very positive, and again, I'm very bullish and excited for some of these major projects to make it to the next step. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Gary.
Thanks, Mike. Once again, for the record, Gary Ameling, Chief Financial Officer. So this slide shows you in a snapshot all of the city's funds other than the redevelopment agency, which Mike just presented. It's presented by category of funds, and so you'll see along the left column there the general fund, which is the fund that provides the majority of the day-to-day services of the city, the special revenue fund category, the capital project fund category, debt service funds, permanent funds, enterprise funds, and internal service funds. In total, the general fund and other fund budgets add up to $2.3 billion for next fiscal year, that we're asking you to adopt the budgets for. I will point out one thing. Based on the way the government accounting standards work, it causes us to have to create all of these funds. And when we move monies between funds, it ends up being double budgeted. It's budgeted in the one fund that's transferring it out, and it's budgeted again in the other fund that's getting the monies transferred in and then needing the expenditure authority to be able to expend those funds. So for example, on the right column there, for the FY25 budget, you see the special revenue fund number at $241.3 million. That includes the use of the fiscal stabilization fund that Susan mentioned. So we're transferring that $55 million over to the capital budgets. So we're spending it out of the fiscal stabilization fund, and then we're spending it again out of the capital project fund budget. Another example that Susan mentioned in the internal service fund number, $234.1 million. The general fund is up $25 million because we're appropriating that $25 million from our reserves to transfer that money to the liability special revenue, internal service fund rather. So it's budgeted both in the general fund as well as in the liability internal service fund. So there's two examples of double budgeting and how that works. It drives us finance people kind of crazy, but that's the way the government accounting standards work. So overall, our budget for this fiscal year is up. Compared to last fiscal year, the budget you adopted a year ago was about $2.2 billion rather. And again, you heard a lot of the reasons why the budgets have changed over the years. On the bottom of this chart, you see the authorized FTE staffing levels. As the city manager mentioned, including our temporary employees and our hourly employees and our regular employees, we have about 3,863 authorized positions in the budget for fiscal year 25. And this is down, as was mentioned earlier, from previous fiscal years. In the FY23 budget, 127 positions were added, and in the FY24 budget, 70 positions were added. So some of the key takeaways from this year's budget, it does respond, we believe, to council's priorities of public safety, healthcare, and diversifying the economy. And the city manager went over the various additions to the budget and focus areas in the budget that align with those council priorities. We did focus this year also on organizational and fiscal health. You heard about the behavioral health clinician that we're adding to the budget. That's in addition to the 3 behavioral health administrators that we already have in the budget. We also put money in the budget this year to enhance our recruitment and retention activities, as well as additional money in city departments for enhanced training efforts. We had taken a lot of the monies out of the budgets for training when the COVID pandemic hit, and so we're putting some of those monies back in the budgets so staff have monies to receive training that they need for their jobs. We also focused on fiscal health, and so this budget, as you heard, is largely a status quo budget. And what that means is that we're trying to preserve and live within our means. We are projecting slower revenue growth, and we're making sure that the city's fiscal health is secure moving forward. We did show you that scary chart, as Susan mentioned, showing that we go into deficit positions in later years of the forecast period, but I can assure you that we will not do that. We will make sure that we bring back budgets that are largely balanced every year, making sure we live within our means. This is a conservative budget. We are expecting slower growth, and so we are trying to make sure that the budget aligns with that slower growth. And then we are filing a deficit budget for next year. It's a $22.2 million deficit. Basically, we're using reserves to make that transfer into the liability internal service fund. If not for that one transfer, the one-time transfer, hopefully, there would be a surplus of about $2.8 million. And so today is the final budget public hearing, so I believe you have to officially open and close the public hearing and listen to any public comment on the city's tentative budget and the changes that we've presented to you from the tentative to the final budget. And then you will be asked to vote to approve the city's final budget as well as the redevelopment agency's final budget. And with that, we will turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Wow. We're all puffing our chests out, I can assure you. First of all, to staff, as you've heard from leadership here, you're the best. I mean, you really, I'm not a big numbers person. I know you live and breathe for numbers and their exactness, but thank you all. And you just have great teams. And Gary, with your endorsement of how this is going to play out, you can't leave. You just have to stay on. Because I know your plan is big things afterwards. But thank you all. And Mike, as this being your first year, you hit a home run with us. The one thing, what I'd like to do is open up public comment, well, which I opened, but to hear from the public and then hear from council, because quite often public gives us more questions to ask. The only thing that wasn't mentioned or covered even ethereally, the fuel revenue tax, as we work on our roads with that sunsetting in '26, is that figured into your piece of your presentation there, Mr. Ford?
Mayor Steve Ford, Deputy City Manager. At this point, it is not, because the presentation that I presented today does not include any of those outside fundings, RTC, flood control district, any of those, that does not included in that. So our budget, I've been working with Ms. Paskey on how we're doing that. We just had the meeting with RTC to receive our portion, our allocation of the RTC budget. Plus, we presented the bond that we'll be working towards to present or to develop other projects, kind of in anticipation of that. But my budget, to answer your question directly, my budget did not contain any of that information. But we know that that's going to be an issue, and we're working towards resolution with RTC.
Wonderful, because I know this is something, as we look forward to the legislative year, that we're going to have to concentrate on, because hearing just from investors or people, hotel people that have voted against continuing and overriding the sunset. So, all right, let's do that. Unless there's a burning question, I'd like to ask the public for their comment, because that may be part of your packages that you're going to ask. So please, if anyone from the public would like to make comment, I'd like to hear from you now. If you'll come forward and state your name for the record and try and keep your questions brief. And then, Mr. Jansen, you'll direct to whom a response would come. So is there anyone that is interested in making comment here? Yes, please come forward and pick a microphone. And as long as the light is on, wonderful.
Since I've spoken in public.
And if you would get right to the microphone, and out of respect for our council, could I trouble you to remove your hat, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. No, you look fine. Please, and pull the microphone closer so we can hear your comments. Thank you, sir.
Yes, my name is Chance Taylor, and we've met before, Madam Mayor, Council. I'm here because on the corner of 10th and Bridger, my family has had stewardship of this corner and this property for over 40 years. And we applied for a security enhancement grant, and I'd like for it to be fully funded rather. Here's a file for each of the council board to take a look at. For many years, the property behind us has been owned by 139-712 060-305 South 10th Street, the Van Hongs out of New York City. And I've been basically dealing with a lot of difficulty, which is documented in here. And I watched the meeting on the 16th, and you talked about dog poop, a problem in downtown area, but I have to call the health department every so often to deal with human waste, because this property is near
Okay.
an alley. And so I want to add more lighting to that corner of 10th Street and Bridger. And all my information is in this file right here.
Okay, and I'm going to ask Mr. Jansen to take this because this is general budget and redevelopment budget. It's very high level, but we want to make sure that we attend to your inquiry, and so Mr. Ameling has it, and we'll make sure the clerk has it, and someone will be responding.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wrote a lot of notes, but I have a couple of questions. We talked about being the 24th largest city in America. I wanted to know, how do we compare with the amount of federal funds that we receive back into our city as compared to those other 24 cities?
Thank you.
Okay, that's one
Where
question. We
would,
really need to know, how are we doing attracting back our federal funds that we spent? We talked a lot about our income and our outgo, but we didn't see a balance sheet. So we don't know how much land the city owns, what kind of capital resources we have. So in addition to the money that's coming in and out, we really need to see a snapshot of where we are, like a balance sheet that we would get in private industry. I don't know if that's
Thank you.
possible. And as far as the redevelopment agency, we talk about how much money we're making, but one of the other goals we had for the RDA was jobs. So, and we didn't see any jobs figures. We don't know if our redevelopment agency expenditures are returning the type of jobs that we anticipated when the agency was created. And what I alluded to when I first came up was the redevelopment agency map. The original map included the historic West Side. I'd like to know what percentage of redevelopment support is actually coming back to the West Side, because we don't see any new development in the West Side for over 70 years. And I talked about establishing a special fund that we could loan to property owners that are in that particular 1986 redevelopment area before it was expanded. Okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? I will close the public hearing then, and let's turn to our council for questions, comments, yes, Councilwoman Seaman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I have a question about the surplus and deficit of 2025 and 2026, the forecasting. Is there any forecasting, including the Badlands judgment, if we, future judgments if we do not succeed on appeals?
Councilwoman Seaman, what I would tell you is right now we have a judgment on one of the 4 cases, as you know, and we are continuing to pursue all of our options related to the other 3. And as we've discussed in the past, the former city manager, Jorge Cervantes, and our CFO, Gary Ameling, has done their best to have us have a reserve fund to try to help us work through things that we have to work through. And as you saw today, that judgment from the Supreme Court, we've been able to work through that with the budget we presented to you today. But as it relates to the other 3 cases, we'll be continuing to work with our city attorney to see what those options are. And so the answer to your question is the projections that you see in there do not capture, for example, a win or a loss. We're aware of the cases, and we're trying to plan our funding as best we can to be ready for whatever the end result is.
Thank you. I'm just a little worried about the $20,000 a day interest occurring. The other question that I have is, I had requested an extra Animal Protective Services officer to investigate illegal breeding. Is that in the budget, or did I miss it?
Councilwoman, I think what we went over was we have actually now 20 positions, 17 animal control officers and 3 supervisors. And so working closely with Chief Potts and Rudy were looking to create a program out of our existing staffing level that can focus on investigations of the ones like you've explained, and I'm confident that our team will be able to implement some of those investigations that will meet the needs and goals of you and our community as a whole. It's an important part of what we do, trying to ensure that people are not doing things they shouldn't be doing. And again, our 20 animal control positions, some of which are vacant. So I think one of our challenges, Councilwoman, is we still have some vacancies. I think when we're fully staffed up, we'll be able to have that program get to where it needs to get to.
Thank you, and good job putting the budget together. Thank you.
And Councilwoman Bruni, any question? Councilman Creer? Let's get down to the end. Councilwoman Penn? Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Diaz, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to make sure, because this comes up quite a bit in Ward 3 in my conversations with constituents, so I just wanted to make sure that we're going to have the resources to continue to update lights and street lights as, unfortunately, they're going down. We're having to put them back up, then they go back down, then we have to put them back up, but then also upgrading the lights to the LED lights that are brighter, because people feel that there are certain parts of our downtown and parts of our community that are quite dark with the old yellowish lights. So I just wanted to know, make sure that that's still accounted for, because I know that's one of the areas that we've been unfortunately struggling with and having to deploy more resources to keep up. There's also a lot of alleys, unfortunately, in my area, and the alleys are sometimes being overtaken by certain elements, and so I just want to make sure that we have the resources to deploy cameras, LED lighting, anything, if the POP teams are the ones that are going to be going through these on a regular basis, just to make sure that our small business owners and our residents, because sometimes those alleys are, adjacent small business strip and then residents on the other side. So I just want to make sure that we're looking out for their quality of life. And then lastly, sidewalk upkeep and infill is a big one also, as we're aging. Some of the housing developments were built in the 1940s. A lot of the sidewalks are buckled, uneven, and just want to make sure that we can continue to move the needle forward on that front.
Councilwoman Diaz, a number of good questions you had. Let me start off with one that we haven't talked today about, is the federal dollars that we get. Joey Paskey, our Public Works Director, was very successful in getting a number of federal grants allocations towards street lighting in particular. To replace street lights is a very clean project. There's not a whole host of environmental work that you have to do. There's not right-of-way issues. It's essentially a plug and play, and so our delegation wants to see projects that can be implemented quickly, intermixed with projects like the Stewart Avenue Greenway, which are much bigger, but I'm happy to tell you that Joey was able to secure a number of millions of dollars towards our LED lighting upgrades. This council in particular, in fiscal year 24 and 23, and I believe even going back to 22, has allocated also additional funds in our capital program, multiple years of dollars towards LED conversions. And so I know Joe Norby and Joey Paskey have been doing a great job retrofitting out all the remaining non-LEDs and getting the lights to the level that our community prefers, the brighter lights. And so I think we're making good progress on converting out all the old ones. With that being said, we still have incidents of copper wire theft, and so we could put in a brand new street of all LED lights, but if someone comes and steals the wire, they look like they're all out. And as you know, we're working with the task force. We are working on a new ordinance related to copper wire to help us with that issue on scrap metal issues. So I think we're trying to hit the lighting component in many different ways. Almost every new CIP project that we've been implementing, particularly where there's lots of alleys, I'll just give you an example. In the Arts District, we're now, as part of the alley reconstruction, we're adding lights where they never used to be. And so that's something that we do now as we do alley reconstructions. And then, we have hundreds of miles of alleys, so not all of them are up for reconstruction. But one of the other tools that we've been employing for certain uses is the use of solar streetlights. They're getting so much better and reliable. Originally, when we started putting them in, 1 or 2 of our summers would eat all the batteries and they'd die, but the technology is getting better. And so I know Joe and Joey have been looking at opportunities to add lighting to some alleys where the complaints have been coming in regularly, where we do our effort to keep the alleys clean, but then the issues come back, and the feedback from the community is a lighted alley is a type of alley that results in less concerns. And so that's one of our other tools. And then I will mention, we also have a partnership with Nevada Energy. We did a number of alley light upgrades in Ward 5. We did a number in Ward 3 in Naked City, where there are lights attached to Nevada Energy poles. They're not our assets, but in partnership with them, we gave them luminaires, LED luminaires, and they took down those really old yellowish lights, or lights that were just burned out. And so I think the answer to your question, Councilwoman, is a lot of different strategies we're deploying and employing to try to improve the lighting concerns you mentioned. I think the last question you had was related to sidewalks. So some people are not fully aware that under our city code, the maintenance of sidewalk is actually the responsibility of the property owner. Now, when we do a roadway project, oftentimes we rebuild the whole street, because to put in new lighting assets, new driveways, a host of things, while we're there, we also do the sidewalk. But when a citizen calls us sometimes to say that, hey, the sidewalk in front of my house is broken, when we investigate it, oftentimes we find it's the roots of a tree on their property that lifted up that sidewalk. And our streets and sanitation team, led by Matt Meyer, has done a great job of working with those property owners, sometimes to replace a sidewalk panel in partnership where it's popped up. And so on a case-by-case basis, we try our best to work with all the residents when there's a sidewalk that is giving them some concern. So again, I think we're trying to be as responsive as we can, and that's been our motto all along.
Thank you. And Councilman Knutson, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And I had one comment and one request. The comment, I just wanted to publicly say thank you, Mike, because it's been a interesting couple of months for me in Ward 1 in particular. And for those who don't know what a city manager does, you've been more than a city manager. You've been out negotiating and wheeling and dealing. And it's reflected in the budget, and it's reflected in the protection of the city, our assets, everything that we've done. You've been really awesome. And so I say thank you, not enough, but I want to say it publicly, thank you for helping. You've done a really awesome job. I'm really proud to be on your team. My request is, and I'm going to double down on what the mayor said, because the RTC board, I think, is going to get a little bit hairy over the next couple of years, and what the mayor said was spot on. I know the RTC met with you all. I know they're planning on coming and briefing our council, but I think it'd be helpful to map out the next 5 or 6 years in different scenarios, losing that FRI funding and what impact that has to the city. And I think it's going to be really relevant for our government affairs team as we partner with other jurisdictions and RTC and our government affairs strategy. And I'm scared of that. And I really think that we need to think proactively about what the future looks like and get ahead of it. So thank you.
And then just briefly mine, I hope we're looking BDRs to take on, because my biggest concern is federal election. What it's going to do to this budget is, in fact, if it's sustainable, that's one set of income looks. If in fact we have a change at the federal level, what is that going to do to the dollars that are coming into us? My hope is, too, that we increase, because of inflation, our reserves as we look to the future more than we have. I know you mentioned the drop. And again, too, as we look to the future and the funds are there, that, again, because of inflation and so many different things, that we increase that 1%, but that would have to come back for the arts. You cannot have a world-class city if you don't have a real cultural sense here. And so those dollars. But I think everything, and again, to go back to the team, the effort and time and change, it's not but 5-6 months off till election, and then all the way through at that point, is there a reassessment as you'll handle it into next year? Because who knows? Right now, you're doing the best you can, which is wonderful. and I think we all appreciate it, and it's just been an honor to serve with you, and this first year of yours, for certain, this is awesome. And you have the best team, and I even look at the Lone Ranger sitting down there all by herself. And I do thank our legal team and Mr. Dorkak and all the legal advice we've had, to say nothing of I noticed that I didn't see any increase in the budget to do more PR and marketing, so I'm hopeful that at some point, he gets a little more money. I want to see a satellite up there so that we can just go. Since we're responsible when there is an emergency, all things feed here, we should have more access. I have no idea what that costs. But again, thank you all, and I am going to ask Mayor Pro Tem, let's take it one at a time. Unless there's any other comment, everybody looks cool. For agenda item number 4, to approve the City of Las Vegas final budget.
Madam Mayor, move to approve the 2025 City of Las Vegas final budget.
Thank you. There's a motion to approve the final budget, 24-25, and that motion carries unanimously. And Mayor Pro Tem, on the redevelopment agency budget, may I have a motion on approving the final redevelopment agency budget?
Madam Mayor, move to approve the fiscal year 2025 redevelopment agency final budget.
Thank you very much. There is a motion. Please vote and please post. Wonderful. Thank
One more
you.
slide, Mayor.
Yes. Oh,
One more.
one more.
We have one next step, Mayor. We have the final budget that we have to prepare the documents for. And so we will be submitting the final budget that you approved just a moment ago to the state by June 3rd, which is the deadline for the city's budget. And the 5-year capital improvement program document will be sent to the state up by August 1st, 2024. So those are our final 2 steps, and that will complete the budget process for this fiscal year.
And that June 3rd, is that a council meeting?
No, you've already given us the authority with your vote just now to go ahead now
It's
and
just filing.
submit these documents to the state.
So do we have to approve the next steps?
No.
Good.
We're all set.
We're voted out.
Voted out.
Thank you all. I know Mr. Jansen's going to give you at least lunch off, right? Thank you all, team. Thank you. Thank you, full team. We just are so grateful. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, and with that, except for our final public comment, I'm sure there is one, our final citizen participation must be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the City Council and Redevelopment Agency. No subject may be acted upon by the City Council or Redevelopment Agency unless the subject's on the agenda scheduled for action. If you wish to be heard, please come to the podium, state your name for the record. Is there anyone wishing to speak under this portion of the agenda? If so, Madam Clerk, would you please set the clock? Whatever that means. What clock are we setting? Oh, okay, thank you. Hearing and seeing no one, our redevelopment agency and city council budget meeting is adjourned. Thank you all, and Madam Clerk, thank you.